My name is Heather Lawrence, 36 years old, and I have always been the family disappointment. At least that is what my parents believed. For years I kept my success a secret, letting them think I had failed at my dream. That changed the day my sister was hospitalized. As I sat silently by her bed, enduring my parents' subtle jabs, a nurse entered the room, bowed slightly, and said, those life-altering words, "Hello, Chief of Surgery." The look on my family faces was priceless. If you have ever been underestimated by your own family, drop a like, subscribe to this channel, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. This story might just give you the vindication you have been waiting for. Growing up, I was always the odd one out in my family. While other 10-year-old girls collected dolls or posters of boy bands, I hoarded medical encyclopedias. My bedroom walls were not decorated with movie stars, but with anatomical charts I had begged the local doctor to give me after his office remodeled. I would spend hours studying these diagrams, memorizing bones, muscles, and organ systems that most adults could not name. My sister Samantha, 2 years younger than me, was the golden child. She was outgoing, conventionally pretty, and pursued interests my parents Eleanor and Thomas could understand: cheerleading, student government, and later business administration. They would beam with pride at her pep rallies and student council speeches. Meanwhile, my science fair victories and perfect scores on biology exams were met with cursory nods and quick changes of subject. Samantha is following in my footsteps, my father would announce proudly to dinner guests. He owned a successful real estate agency in town. Business sense runs in our blood. Then, almost as an afterthought, he would add, and Heather, well, she likes her books. One particular memory stands out vividly in my mind. I was 12, and I had just won the state science competition with a project on heart valve function. Instead of attending my award ceremony, my parents took Samantha shopping for a new outfit for her middle school dance. My grandmother Barbara drove me instead. They just do not understand you, dear, she said gently on the way home, as I clutched my blue ribbon and fought back tears. Sometimes the brightest lights cast the longest shadows. I did not fully understand what she meant then, but her words stayed with me. The Christmas I turned 16 was when the pattern of favoritism became impossible to ignore. As we sat around the dinner table, my father asked about our future plans, a tradition in our family. I want to be a surgeon, I announced confidently. Cardiothoracic specifically. The silence that followed was broken by my father chuckling. A surgeon. Do you have any idea how competitive medical school is? How many years of training that would take? How much that would cost us? He shook his head, exchanging a look with my mother. Maybe aim for something more realistic. Nursing is a fine profession. Samantha piped up, I want to major in business and join Dad's company, and the table erupted in enthusiastic approval. Now that is a solid plan, my mother beamed. Later that night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Heather always has her head in the clouds, my father sighed. She does not understand the real world. She will grow out of it, my mother assured him. Not everyone can be as practical as Samantha. The comparison was constant. Samantha got straight, as in subjects they valued. I got straight, as in subjects they dismissed. Samantha dated the quarterback. I stayed late for science club. Samantha planned for business school. I researched medical school requirements. The summer before college, I worked 3 jobs to save money. I knew that despite my parents' comfortable financial situation, I would largely be on my own. Each time I brought up pre-med courses, my mother would redirect the conversation to more sensible options. Your cousin Amanda went to community college for dental hygiene and she has such a stable job now, she would suggest. Or, have you thought about pharmacy? You would still be in healthcare, but it would be much easier. The subtext was always clear: we do not believe you can do this. My acceptance to university on a full academic scholarship was met with surprised congratulations that quickly turned to warnings. Just remember, you can always come home if it gets too difficult, my father said, patting my shoulder. No shame in recognizing your limitations. Even as I packed my bags for college, Samantha was the center of attention with her new boyfriend Bradley, whom my parents already treated like a son-in-law. They spent more time discussing Samantha's relationship over dinner than asking about my upcoming move. The night before I left, my grandmother Barbara visited. She slipped an envelope into my hand. "I believe in you," she whispered, hugging me tight. Inside was $5,000 she had saved, along with a note, "For when the journey gets tough. And it will, but so are you." That money would later save my education, but her belief in me was the true gift. It was the first time anyone in my family had unconditionally supported my dreams. As I drove away from home toward university, I made myself a promise I would become a surgeon whether my family believed I could or not. Their doubt would not define my future. Little did I know just how difficult keeping that promise would become, or how sweetly satisfying it would feel when I finally did. College hit me like a tidal wave. I had been at the top of my high school class without much effort, but pre-med courses were a different beast entirely. Organic chemistry, physics, and advanced biology all demanded hours of study time. While other freshmen were attending parties and football games, I was buried in textbooks at the library. My scholarship covered tuition but not living expenses. Meanwhile, my parents funded not only Samantha's full tuition at the state business school, but also her apartment off campus. When I called home asking if they might help with my rent, my father's response was predictable. "We're already stretched thin with Samantha's expenses," he explained. "Besides, if medicine is really your path, you should be prepared for financial sacrifice. Consider it your first test." So I worked. I shelved books at the university library in the mornings, waited tables at a campus cafe in the afternoons, and on weekends, I did administrative work at a local clinic. Between jobs and classes, I survived on 4 hours of sleep most nights. Despite my exhaustion, I maintained a 3.9 GPA through my first 2 years. Each stellar report card was emailed home and met with the same tepid response. "That's nice, dear. Samantha just got an internship at Capital Investments." The summer after sophomore year, Samantha got engaged to Bradley. My parents threw an elaborate engagement party, spending thousands on catering and decorations. That same month, I was accepted to a prestigious summer research program, but I couldn't afford the housing costs to attend. When I mentioned this to my mother, hoping for some financial assistance, she seemed genuinely perplexed. "But it's just research, Heather. It's not like it's a real job. We need to save for Samantha's wedding anyway." I watched from afar on social media as they planned Samantha's dream wedding. Every detail was meticulously curated and generously funded by my parents. Meanwhile, I took on extra shifts and a short-term medical transcription job to make ends meet. The breaking point came during my junior year. Finals week coincided with an unexpected rent increase. My landlord Franklin gave me 3 days to come up with an extra $300 or face eviction. I picked up emergency overnight shifts at a 24-hour diner while studying during slow periods. For 3 nights straight, I didn't sleep. By the time my pathophysiology exam arrived, I was running on caffeine and determination alone. I sat down, looked at the test, and the words swam before my eyes. Concepts I had mastered weeks before seemed foreign. I struggled through each question, my hands shaking from exhaustion and stress. I failed. Not marginally, but catastrophically. A 47% that the Professor Rebecca circled in bright red. "This isn't like you, Heather," she said with concern when I went to her office hours. "One bad exam won't ruin your medical school chances, but you're on thin ice. I'm placing you on academic probation until you demonstrate improvement." The word probation echoed in my mind as I made the dreaded call home. For the first time, I admitted to my parents how much I was struggling financially. Though it wounded my pride, I asked for help. My father's response cut deeper than I had anticipated. "We knew medicine wasn't for you," he said, his voice a mixture of disappointment and vindication. "Come home and work at your uncle's store. There's no shame in recognizing when you've aimed too high." "Everyone struggles, Dad," I protested. "I just need a little help to get back on track." "Samantha never needed this kind of bailout," he countered. "Maybe it's time to accept that you're not cut out for this." The conversation ended with no offer of assistance, only an invitation to return home in defeat. What hurt even more was discovering through extended family at Thanksgiving that my parents had been sharing a distorted version of my situation. "So sorry to hear you couldn't hack it in medical school," my Aunt Patricia said, sympathetically patting my hand across the dinner table. "I'm not in medical school yet," I corrected her. "I'm still an undergraduate, and I'm not dropping out." "Oh," she looked confused. "Your mother said you were struggling with doctor studies and might come work for your uncle." Throughout the weekend, I received similar comments from relatives who had been told I was failing and giving up on my unrealistic dream. My parents had been so certain of my failure that they'd already begun spreading the news. I returned to campus with renewed determination born from anger and hurt. If they were so eager to see me fail, I would make it impossible for them to spin that narrative. A turning point came when Dr. Margaret Collins, my biochemistry professor, called me into her office. I braced for another lecture about my declining performance, but instead she offered me a lifeline. "You're one of the brightest students I've had," she said, studying me with kind but shrewd eyes. "But something's wrong, you look exhausted." To my horror, I broke down in her office confessing everything: the financial struggles, the multiple jobs, my family's lack of support, and the academic probation. Instead of pity, she offered a solution. "I need a research assistant for my lab. It pays $15 an hour, 20 hours weekly, and you can do some of the data analysis on your own schedule. The position comes with a small housing stipend for my lab members." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Why me? Especially now, when I'm not at my best." "Because your worst is still better than most students' best," she said simply. "And because someone once took a chance on me when I was in your position." Dr. Collins became more than a professor. She became my mentor. With the research position providing financial stability, I was able to quit 2 of my 3 jobs. My grades recovered, and I was removed from academic probation the following semester. For the first time, I had someone in the academic world who believed in me unconditionally. Dr. Collins did not just teach me biochemistry, she taught me resilience. She showed me what it meant to be a woman in medicine, fighting twice as hard for half the recognition. "Never let them see you doubt yourself," she advised me. "Medicine has enough external challenges without adding your own insecurities to the mix." After my experience with my family's reaction, I made a decision that would shape the next decade of my life. I stopped sharing my academic and career developments with my parents. Their validation, I realized, was something I might never receive, and more importantly, I no longer needed it. With Dr. Collins' mentorship, my academic career took a dramatic upward turn. I not only recovered from probation but excelled, making the Dean's List 3 semesters in a row. My research with Dr. Collins led to a publication in an undergraduate science journal, a rare achievement for a student not yet in graduate school. When I was accepted to 3 medical schools, including one with a partial scholarship, I deliberated for days about whether to tell my family. In the end, I shared the news during a brief weekend visit home, trying to keep my expectations low. "Medical school? Well, that's ambitious," my mother said, her smile tight. "I hope you know what you're getting into." My father nodded absently. "Just don't come asking for money when the loans start piling up." Samantha, now married to Bradley, and working at our father's real estate company, seemed genuinely happy for me, though even her congratulations came with a qualification. "That's amazing, Heather. Though I don't know how you'll handle all those years of school. I'm already settled with a career and a husband, and you're just starting." The implication was clear: her path was the successful one, while mine was a delayed journey to adulthood. My medical school graduation 4 years later coincided with Samantha's baby shower for her first child. Despite explaining months in advance that I couldn't miss my own graduation, my mother called the night before, guilt-tripping me. "Samantha is so disappointed. This is the most important day of her life and her own sister won't be there." I bit back the retort that my graduation was the most important day of my life. Instead, I simply said, "I'm sorry to miss it. Please give her my love." My parents did attend my graduation, but they seemed uncomfortable among the proud families cheering enthusiastically for their graduates. They clapped politely when my name was called, but there were no tears of joy or boisterous celebrations. At dinner afterward, my father asked more questions about my student loan debt than my accomplishments or future plans. My mother spent most of the meal showing photos of Samantha's ultrasound to our server Rachel. 2 months later, I missed Samantha's baby shower for a critical residency interview at Massachusetts General Hospital. When I called to explain, my mother was furious. "Your sister needed you today, and you chose your hobby over family," she snapped. "It's not a hobby, Mom. It's my career," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This residency could determine the next 5 years of my life." "Well, Samantha has a real job and is starting a family. Those are actual accomplishments." I ended the call before saying something I might regret, but the message was clear: no matter what I achieved, it would never be valued in their eyes. Residency was brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. The 100-hour work weeks, the sleep deprivation, the emotional toll of losing patients despite your best efforts all tested my resolve daily. The hospital hierarchy was rigid and often unforgiving, especially to female residents who were held to higher standards than their male counterparts. In this challenging environment, I found an unexpected ally in nurse Stephanie Wilson. Experienced and no-nonsense, Stephanie had worked in surgery for 15 years and knew more about the practical aspects of patient care than many attending physicians. "You're different from the other residents," she told me, after we had successfully stabilized a post-operative patient whose blood pressure had dropped dangerously. "You actually listen to nurses." Stephanie became my guide through the complex social dynamics of the hospital. She warned me about which attendings held grudges, which administrators played politics, and which colleagues couldn't be trusted. Her insights were invaluable as I navigated the competitive residency program. During my second year of residency, I met Dr. William Taylor, a brilliant neurosurgeon who shared my passion for research. Our friendship blossomed into romance, the first serious relationship I'd allowed myself since starting medical school. For a few months, I experienced what it felt like to have both professional drive and personal happiness. But the demands of residency took their toll. As I progressed, earning more responsibilities and working on more complex cases, the little free time I had evaporated. William grew increasingly frustrated with canceled dates and my exhaustion on the rare nights we did spend together. "There's more to life than surgery, Heather," he said during our final argument. "I need someone with more balance." The breakup stung, but I understood his perspective. I had chosen a path that demanded total commitment, at least during these training years. While other women my age were building families, I was building a career that left little room for anything else. When I called Samantha for comfort after the breakup, her response was predictably insensitive. "Maybe this is a wake-up call," she suggested. "You're 31, Heather. Your biological clock is ticking. Maybe it's time to focus on finding a husband instead of spending all your time at the hospital." I didn't bother explaining that I loved my work, that surgery gave me a fulfillment I hadn't found in any relationship. Instead, I changed the subject and shortened the call. As my family's emotional support remained conditional and judgmental, I built a surrogate family among my colleagues. We understood each other's sacrifices and celebrated each other's triumphs in ways my biological family never could. A successful surgery, a correctly diagnosed rare condition, a patient saved against the odds, these were victories my parents would never fully appreciate, but my hospital family certainly did. With each passing year, the distance between my two worlds grew. I visited home less frequently, finding the constant comparisons to Samantha and subtle digs about my personal life increasingly difficult to bear. Meanwhile, at the hospital, I was thriving, developing a reputation for taking on the cases other residents avoided: the complex, the risky, the seemingly hopeless. "Lawrence doesn't give up" became a saying among the nurses. Coming from them, it was the highest praise possible. What my family never understood, what they never tried to understand, was that I hadn't chosen medicine for prestige or money. I had chosen it because nothing else made me feel so completely alive, so utterly necessary. Every time my hands helped heal what was broken, every time my knowledge made the difference between life and death, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. By the final year of my surgical residency, I had developed a specialty in reconstructive vascular procedures, particularly in trauma cases. My research on improving blood flow restoration after severe injuries caught the attention of the surgical community, resulting in my first major publication in the Journal of Trauma Surgery. Dr. Howard Bennett, the hospital director, called me into his office after the publication went live. "This is impressive work, Dr. Lawrence," he said, gesturing to the journal open on his desk. "You've put our hospital on the map with this research." I thanked him, trying to conceal my pride. Recognition from someone of his stature was rare and valuable. "The chief resident position opens next month," he continued. "I hope you're planning to apply." The chief resident role was highly coveted, essentially serving as the right hand to the chief of surgery while completing specialized training. It typically went to residents with family connections or graduates from the most prestigious medical schools, neither of which described me. My main competition was Dr. Jacqueline Adams, a fifth-generation physician whose grandfather had a wing named after him at Johns Hopkins. Jacqueline made no secret of considering the position her birthright. My father was chief resident here, and his father before him she mentioned frequently during rounds, always within earshot of attending physicians. It's a family tradition. Jacqueline came from the world my parents had always wanted for me: old money, social connections, and effortless privilege. Her surgical skills were solid but unremarkable. What she lacked in innovation she made up for in political savvy, always knowing exactly whose ego needed stroking. The competition between us remained professional but tense until the Mitchell case. 64-year-old Gerald Mitchell was admitted with a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm, a condition with a high mortality rate even under the best circumstances. Both Jacqueline and I were on call that night. I arrived at the emergency room first and began assessment and stabilization. Minutes later, Jacqueline appeared and tried to take over. "I'll handle this one," she said, already reaching for the chart. My father pioneered a technique for this exact scenario. Standard protocol dictated that the first responding resident maintained primary responsibility unless they requested assistance. I stood my ground. "I've already established rapport with the patient and begun treatment. I'll continue as primary, but you're welcome to assist." Her eyes narrowed, but with nurses watching, she had no choice but to accept. During surgery prep, I noticed something alarming. The blood type on Mitchell's chart had been changed from AB negative to A positive. With the wrong blood type, transfusion during surgery would kill him. I immediately called for verification with the lab and discovered the original typing was correct. The change had been made just minutes before surgery, while Jacqueline had been reviewing the chart. There was no definitive proof she had altered it, but the timing was suspicious. If the patient had died during my surgery due to an incompatible transfusion, my career would have been over. When I confronted her privately, she displayed only cool indifference. "Clerical errors happen all the time, Lawrence. Perhaps you should focus more on your surgical technique and less on administrative oversights." The Mitchell surgery became my defining case. For 7 hours, I worked to repair the damaged aorta while managing dangerous drops in blood pressure and cardiac complications. The attending surgeon, Dr. Richard Mason, who had planned to lead instead, stepped back and allowed me to direct the procedure, intervening only with occasional guidance. When Mitchell not only survived but recovered with minimal complications, Dr. Mason publicly commended my work during morning rounds. "Dr. Lawrence demonstrated exemplary judgment and technique in the Mitchell case," he announced to the assembled team. Her quick identification of the blood type discrepancy potentially saved the patient's life before surgery even began. I noticed Dr. Howard standing at the back of the group, listening intently. 2 weeks later, I was named chief resident over Jacqueline, whose family connections and veiled threats of donor withdrawal could not overcome the growing recognition of my skills. The night I received the news, I called my parents, breaking my usual rule about sharing career developments. For once, I thought they might be proud. "Chief resident. Is that like a promotion?" my father asked vaguely. "It's a significant honor," I explained. "Only one resident is selected each year." "Well, that's nice, dear," my mother said. "Did we tell you Samantha's been asked to join the country club board, youngest member ever selected?" The familiar sting of dismissal had lost some of its power over the years. I changed the subject, asking about my niece Emma's dance recital. and silently accepted that some dynamics would never change. My personal life had become nearly non-existent. Dates were rare and relationships rarer still. My last attempt at romance had ended when Marcus, an architect I'd been seeing for 3 months, grew tired of my unpredictable schedule. "I never know which Heather I'm getting," he had said during our breakup conversation. "The exhausted one who falls asleep during dinner, or the distracted one checking her phone for hospital updates." I couldn't argue with his assessment. Surgery demanded a singular focus that left little energy for nurturing relationships. While I sometimes felt the absence of partnership, particularly on the rare quiet evenings at home, I never regretted my choice. The operating room provided a clarity and purpose I hadn't found elsewhere. Stephanie, now the head surgical nurse and my closest friend, was the only one who truly understood. "Some people aren't meant for conventional happiness," she told me during a rare coffee break. "They're meant for extraordinary impact." The most unexpected development came near the end of my chief resident year, when Dr. Howard called me into his office again. The current chief of surgery, Dr. Leonard Thompson, had announced his retirement, and the hospital was beginning the search for his replacement. "I want you to apply, Dr. Howard said, without preamble. I stared at him in disbelief. "I'm still completing my residency. The position typically goes to surgeons with at least 15 years of experience." "Typically, yes. But your research is bringing in grants and recognition. Your patient outcomes are the best in the department. The board is interested in someone who can modernize our approach and bring fresh perspectives." "Dr. Adams would have a conniption," I said before I could stop myself. Dr. Howard actually smiled. "Dr. Adams doesn't have your talent, and the board knows it. At least consider applying." The application process was grueling. I submitted my surgical case history, research publications, and vision for the department. Multiple interviews followed, including a particularly intense session with the hospital board, where I was grilled on everything from budgetary management to handling personnel conflicts. Throughout this process, doubts crept in. Was I reaching too high too soon? What if I wasn't ready? The voice in my head sounded suspiciously like my father's. During my final interview, Dr. Thompson himself asked the question that cut to the heart of my insecurities. "You're remarkably young for this position, Dr. Lawrence. Many excellent surgeons with decades more experience have applied. Why should we choose you over them?" I took a breath and answered honestly. "Because I've never had the luxury of coasting on reputation or connections. Every opportunity I've earned has come through demonstrable excellence and innovation. I've developed techniques that reduce mortality in vascular trauma by 22%. I've brought in research funding that exceeds the department's previous 5-year total. And I've done it all while being told repeatedly that I was aiming too high." He studied me for a long moment before nodding. "Sometimes the old guard needs to be reminded why we entered medicine in the first place. Your passion is refreshing." 3 weeks of anxious waiting followed. I threw myself into work, performing surgeries by day and revising research papers by night, anything to keep my mind occupied. When the email finally came, I was in the doctor's lounge between cases. "We are pleased to offer you the position of Chief of Surgery effective following Dr. Thompson's retirement next month." I read it 3 times to be sure, then sat down hard on the nearest chair, overwhelmed by a complex mixture of vindication, pride, and sheer disbelief. At 35, I had become the youngest chief of surgery in the hospital's 120-year history and one of the few women to hold the position. As congratulations poured in from colleagues and the news spread through medical circles, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would not tell my family. After years of dismissal and minimization, after having every achievement compared unfavorably to Samantha's conventional life choices, I wanted this triumph to remain unsullied by their inevitable, underwhelming response. This was mine, earned through sacrifice and persistence they had never understood or supported. For once, I would not seek the validation they had always withheld. The transition to chief of surgery brought challenges I hadn't anticipated. Administrative duties consumed time I would have preferred to spend in the operating room. Department politics required careful navigation, particularly with older surgeons who resented taking direction from someone they viewed as inexperienced. Dr. Jacqueline Adams, who had remained as an attending surgeon, became my most vocal critic, questioning my decisions in staff meetings and subtly undermining my authority whenever possible. "This is how we've always done things," became her mantra whenever I proposed changes. Despite the resistance, I gradually implemented improvements, streamlined pre-surgical protocols that reduced preparation time, new sterilization procedures that lowered infection rates, and a mentorship program pairing experienced surgeons with promising residents. The results spoke for themselves. Within 6 months, our department's mortality rates decreased, patient satisfaction scores improved, and operating costs reduced without sacrificing quality of care. My schedule grew even more demanding. Early mornings began with administrative meetings, followed by surgeries, teaching rounds with residents' research supervision, and late evenings catching up on paperwork. Most nights I slept on the cot in my office rather than making the 30-minute drive home. Months passed with minimal contact with my family. Holidays were spent with hospital colleagues or on call. My parents occasionally called, mainly to share news about Samantha's children or her husband Bradley's latest promotion. I learned to deflect questions about my own life with vague assurances that work was going well. They never pressed for details, seemingly content with the assumption that I was still just a surgeon among many at some hospital, as my father referred to it. In medical circles, however, my reputation continued to grow. I was invited to speak at conferences, contribute to textbooks, and consult on complex cases at other hospitals. A profile in the American Journal of Surgery highlighted my innovative approaches to vascular reconstruction and department management, dubbing me the future of surgical leadership. None of this registered with my family, who moved in social and professional worlds entirely separate from medicine. I maintained my silence about my position, finding a peculiar satisfaction in their obliviousness. This delicate balance was disrupted on a Tuesday morning during a budget meeting. My assistant Catherine interrupted with an urgent message. My sister Samantha had been admitted to our emergency room with severe abdominal pain. I immediately went to the ER, where the attending physician, Dr. Brian Walsh, briefed me. Gallstone pancreatitis, likely requiring surgical removal of the gallbladder. We're running additional tests to confirm and rule out complications. "Who's scheduled for general surgery today?" I asked. "Dr. Reynolds has the morning block." Timothy Reynolds was one of our best general surgeons, particularly skilled with laparoscopic procedures. Samantha would be in excellent hands. "Keep me updated on her condition, but proceed with standard protocols," I instructed, deliberately not pulling rank to give my sister special treatment. The professional decision made, I now faced a personal dilemma: how to be present for Samantha without revealing my position. After brief consideration, I decided to meet her as a sister first, leaving the complicated explanation for later if necessary. When I arrived at her room, my parents were already there, hovering anxiously over Samantha, who looked uncomfortable but not critically ill. "Heather," my mother Angela said with surprise. "How did you know Samantha was here?" "I work here, remember," I said simply. My father frowned. "You could have told us you worked at this specific hospital. We would have requested you as her doctor." "I'm not a general surgeon," I explained, patiently omitting that as chief of surgery, I oversaw all surgical departments. "Samantha will be in good hands with Dr. Reynolds." I sat beside Samantha's bed, genuinely concerned for her health despite our complicated relationship. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone stabbing me repeatedly," she grimaced. "They gave me something for the pain, but it still hurts." "Gallstone pain can be incredibly intense," I sympathized, "but the surgery has excellent outcomes, and recovery is usually quick." My mother interrupted, turning to a nurse who had entered to check Samantha's vitals. "My daughter is having severe pain. Can't you give her something stronger? And when will we meet with the real doctor? We've been waiting for hours." The nurse, whom I recognized as Angela Miller from the surgical floor, glanced at me with slight confusion before answering professionally. "Dr. Reynolds will be by shortly to discuss the surgical plan. The medication schedule is carefully calibrated to manage pain while keeping the patient alert enough for consultation." My mother seemed unsatisfied but didn't press further. As Angela completed her checks and left, my father turned to me. So you're still at the same hospital after all these years, no advancement. I bit the inside of my cheek before responding. I'm satisfied with my position. Samantha made junior partner at the firm last year, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Bradley's team closed that resort development deal, which I'm sure you heard about. They're looking at vacation homes in Aspen now. I nodded politely, the familiar pattern of comparison resuming as if we hadn't been discussing Samantha's acute medical condition moments before. For the next hour, I sat quietly as my parents alternated between fretting over Samantha and updating me on the family achievements I'd missed. My professional accomplishments remained unmentioned because they remained unknown, a situation entirely of my own making. As the morning progressed, various hospital staff entered the room. Each interaction brought a moment of tension as I wondered if they would address me by my title. Fortunately, most recognized the family situation and maintained professional discretion, though I noticed confused glances when my parents referred to me simply as our other daughter or Samantha's sister. Dr. Reynolds arrived for the pre-surgical consultation, a folder of scan results in hand. He stopped short upon seeing me. Dr. Law. Heather. I didn't realize the patient was your sister. Just coincidence, I said smoothly. Please proceed as you normally would. He nodded, understanding the subtext, and turned to Samantha and my parents. I'm Dr. Reynolds. I'll be performing your laparoscopic cholecystectomy, the removal of your gallbladder. As he explained the procedure risks and recovery process, my mother interrupted several times with questions that betrayed her anxiety. Dr. Reynolds handled each with patience, though I could see him glancing at me occasionally, perhaps wondering why I wasn't providing more context to my family. The tension in the room was building. Several nurses had now seen me, and word would be spreading through the hospital that the chief of surgery's sister was admitted. It was only a matter of time before someone inadvertently revealed what I had kept hidden for nearly a year. Part of me wanted to continue the charade to maintain the protective distance I'd established between my professional success and my family's perception. Another part, however, was growing tired of the pretense of diminishing myself to avoid their dismissal. As Dr. Reynolds concluded his explanation and prepared to leave, my father asked, "Should we get a second opinion? No offense, but Samantha's health is very important to us." Before Dr. Reynolds could respond, the door opened and Nurse Stephanie Wilson entered, carrying a clipboard of pre-surgical forms. Her eyes widened slightly upon seeing me. The moment of truth had arrived. Stephanie paused just inside the doorway, her experienced eyes taking in the scene. I gave her a small nod, accepting the inevitable. "Hello, Chief of Surgery," she said with the slight bow that had become customary among the surgical staff. "I didn't expect to see you here today. I thought you were in budget meetings all morning." The room fell silent. My mother's hand froze midair where she had been gesturing. My father's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Samantha pushed herself up against her pillows, wincing at the movement, but clearly unwilling to miss whatever was coming next. I confirmed calmly, but I stepped out when I heard my sister had been admitted. Stephanie's eyes darted between my family members, registering their shock. "I have the pre-surgical forms for Mrs. Cooper. Should I come back later?" "No, now is fine," I said. "Dr. Reynolds has already explained the procedure." As Stephanie approached Samantha's bed with the forms, my father found his voice. "What did she call you?" he demanded, his tone suggesting he must have misheard. I met his gaze steadily. "Chief of Surgery. That's my position here." "That's impossible," my mother said immediately. "You're not. You can't be." The door opened again and Dr. Howard entered. "Heather, I heard your sister was admitted. I wanted to check if you needed anything." He nodded politely to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence, I presume I'm Robert Howard, Hospital Director. Your daughter runs an exceptional surgical department." My father stood abruptly. "There must be some mistake. Heather is just a surgeon here." Dr. Howard looked confused. "No mistake. Dr. Lawrence has been our chief of surgery for nearly a year now. Youngest in our history, and one of the most effective I've worked with." The expression on my father's face shifted from disbelief to something more complex, a mixture of shock and dawning realization. My mother simply stared, her social composure, for once completely abandoned. Samantha broke the awkward silence. "You're the boss of the whole surgery department." I confirmed. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, genuine hurt in her voice. Before I could answer, Dr. Reynolds returned with an anesthesiologist, Dr. Diana Winters. They both nodded respectfully in my direction. "Chief Lawrence, I've reviewed your sister's case," Dr. Reynolds said professionally. "Standard laparoscopic approach should be straightforward, but given your expertise in minimizing vascular complications, I'd welcome your opinion on the surgical plan." This was standard procedure, the chief reviewing complex or personally significant cases, but in this context it highlighted the authority I wielded. "Your approach sounds appropriate," I said after reviewing the scan results he offered. "Let's proceed as discussed." My father, always quick to recover in social situations, attempted damage control. "Of course we knew Heather was doing well in her career," he said to Dr. Howard. "We've always supported her ambitions. It's just been a while since we discussed the details of her position." Dr. Howard smiled politely, but didn't engage further, excusing himself to attend to other matters. As he left, more hospital staff arrived to prepare Samantha for surgery, each addressing me with the deference accorded to my position. "Dr. Lawrence, Radiology sent up the additional contrast images you requested. Chief, the board wants to confirm you'll still make the 4 o'clock strategic planning meeting." "Dr. Lawrence, should we proceed with the scheduled observation for the surgical residents, or would you prefer to postpone given the personal circumstances?" With each interaction, my parents' expressions grew more stunned. The reality of my position was becoming undeniable, illustrated not just in words, but in the way the entire department functioned around my authority. As the room briefly emptied between preparations, my father attempted to regain his footing. "Why would you keep this from us?" he asked, his tone accusatory despite the circumstances. "This is the kind of thing parents should know." I considered deflecting, offering some polite fiction about assuming they knew, or meaning to tell them eventually. Instead, I chose honesty. "Because nothing I've ever accomplished has been good enough for you," I said quietly. "Every achievement has been compared to Samantha's and found wanting. I got tired of offering up my successes for dismissal." "That's not true," my mother protested weakly. "We've always been proud of you." "Have you?" I asked. "When I made chief resident, you changed the subject to Samantha's country club position. When I published research that changed surgical protocols nationwide, you asked when I was going to find a husband. At a certain point, I stopped setting myself up for disappointment." My father, never comfortable with direct emotional confrontation, shifted to practical matters. "Well, this position must come with a significant salary. You should talk to Bradley about investment opportunities." Even now, he couldn't simply acknowledge the achievement. I felt a strange sense of validation, the familiar dismissal confirming that my decision to keep my success private had been justified. Samantha, surprisingly, was the only one who offered genuine recognition. "This is incredible, Heather," she said, reaching for my hand. "I had no idea you were so important." The orderlies arrived to transport Samantha to pre-op. As they prepared to move her, she held my hand tighter. "Will you check on me after surgery?" she asked, vulnerability replacing her usual confidence. "Of course," I assured her. "I'll be monitoring everything closely." As they wheeled her out, my parents seemed uncertain whether to follow or stay and continue the conversation. My father checked his watch. "The surgery will take, an hour or two? We should get some coffee." "Actually," I said, "I'll be observing from the surgical gallery. You're welcome to wait in the family lounge on the 3rd floor. The volunteers there can keep you updated." "You can just watch your sister's surgery?" my mother asked, still processing the scope of my authority. "I can observe any surgery in this hospital," I confirmed. "It's part of my responsibility to maintain quality standards across all procedures." They exchanged glances, decades of assumptions visibly crumbling between them. "We'll wait in the lounge," my father finally said, "but we should talk more after Samantha's out of surgery." I nodded agreement, though I suspected any conversation would follow the same patterns established over decades, no matter what title preceded my name. As they left, Stephanie lingered behind. "That was quite a revelation," she commented. "Are you okay?" I considered the question seriously. You know what's strange? I thought I'd feel more satisfaction seeing their shock, but mostly I just feel validated. Like the story I've been telling myself about their inability to recognize my worth wasn't just in my head. "Families are complicated," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "But for what it's worth, the rest of us around here think you're pretty remarkable." I smiled at my friend, grateful for her perspective. Let's make sure my sister gets the best care possible. That's what really matters today. As I walked toward the observation gallery, my phone buzzed with messages from the administrative staff, the research team, and surgical residents with questions that wouldn't wait. Chief of surgery was more than a title. It was a constant responsibility, one that continued even as personal dramas unfolded. I responded to each message, efficiently compartmentalizing, as surgeons are trained to do. My family's revelation would be processed later. For now, I had a department to run and a sister to heal. From the observation gallery, I watched Dr. Reynolds perform Samantha's surgery with precision and skill. The procedure went smoothly, the gallbladder removed through small laparoscopic incisions that would heal with minimal scarring. Throughout the operation, I found myself in the unusual position of being both a medical professional, analyzing surgical technique, and a sister concerned for a loved one's well-being. As the final sutures were placed, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief at the successful procedure, lingering tension from the family revelation, and uncertainty about what would follow. The automatic compartmentalization that had served me well professionally now helped me focus on immediate priorities. Samantha's recovery came first. The family dynamics could wait. In the recovery room, I reviewed Samantha's vitals and post-operative care plan with the attending nurse, Jennifer Morris. "Standard protocol should be sufficient," I confirmed. "But page me directly with any concerns, no matter how minor." Jennifer nodded, understanding that despite my professional demeanor, this patient held personal significance. My parents were waiting in the family consultation room, both looking somewhat subdued. I updated them on the surgery's success and explained the recovery timeline. "She'll need to stay overnight for observation, but barring complications, she can go home tomorrow. Complete recovery takes about a week, though. She should avoid strenuous activity for several weeks." My mother nodded, her earlier shock now replaced with the practical concern of a parent. "We'll help with the children while she recovers. Bradley can't possibly manage everything himself." "That would be helpful for her," I agreed. "The most important thing is giving her body time to heal properly." An awkward silence followed the revelation of my position still hanging between us. My father cleared his throat. "So, Chief of Surgery, that's quite an achievement. How long have you held this position?" "Almost a year," I said. "I was appointed after Dr. Thompson retired." "A year," my mother repeated, the implied accusation clear in her tone. "And you never thought to mention it." Rather than becoming defensive, I asked a question that had been forming in my mind during the surgery. Would it have mattered if I had? Would it have changed how you view my career choices? My father shifted uncomfortably. "Of course it would matter. This is a prestigious position." "That's my point," I said quietly. "The prestige matters to you, not the work itself, not the years of sacrifice and dedication that led to this role." "That's not fair," my mother protested. "We've always supported your choices." "Have you?" I challenged gently. "Because what I remember is being told repeatedly that my goals were unrealistic, that I should lower my expectations, that Samantha's path was the successful one while mine was impractical." My father's expression hardened. "We were being realistic. Medicine is a difficult field, and we didn't want you to be disappointed." "Parents are supposed to believe in their children's potential," I countered, "even perhaps especially when the path is difficult." Before the conversation could become more heated, a nurse appeared to inform us that Samantha was awake and asking for her family. The discussion would have to continue later. In the recovery room, Samantha looked pale but alert. She smiled weakly when she saw me. "So, my big sister is a hospital big shot," she said, her voice raspy from the intubation tube. Something like that, I acknowledged with a small smile. Why didn't you tell me? She asked directly. I thought we were closer than that. While my parents waited outside to give us privacy, I sat beside Samantha's bed and considered her question carefully. I think I needed to keep this one thing for myself, I finally said. Throughout our lives, everything I've achieved has been compared to your accomplishments and always found lacking. My academic success was never as valuable as your social connections. My career advancement was never as important as your family milestones. I never asked for that comparison, Samantha said defensively. I know you didn't, I assured her. But it happened anyway, and after a while I stopped sharing my professional life because I couldn't bear to have it dismissed again. Samantha was silent for a moment, processing this perspective that clearly hadn't occurred to her before. I've been jealous of you, she admitted unexpectedly. Jealous? Of me? Why would you possibly be jealous? Because you've built your life entirely on your own terms, she explained. You've never compromised your dreams to meet anyone else's expectations. Do you know how rare that is? How brave? The admission stunned me. In all our years of sisterhood, through all the comparisons and competition, it had never occurred to me that Samantha might envy my independence. I always thought you had everything, I confessed. The perfect life that our parents wanted for both of us. It is perfect in many ways, she acknowledged. I love Bradley and the kids, but sometimes I wonder what I might have accomplished if I hadn't been so focused on being the daughter our parents wanted. This vulnerable exchange marked the beginning of a new understanding between us. For the first time, we were seeing each other clearly, without the distorting lens of parental expectations and sibling rivalry. The next evening, after Samantha was discharged, my parents insisted on a family dinner at their home. Bradley would bring the children over later after Samantha had rested. Seated around the dining table that had been the site of so many uncomfortable family dynamics over the years, my father attempted to reframe the narrative. We always knew you would do well in medicine, he claimed, pouring wine with the confidence of someone rewriting history. I told your mother just last year that Heather was probably running that hospital by now. I met my mother's eyes across the table, and surprisingly, she didn't support this fiction. No, Thomas, that's not true, she said quietly. We never gave Heather the credit she deserved. We should at least be honest about that. Her unexpected honesty created an opening for genuine conversation. Why was it so hard to believe in me? I asked, the question that had lingered for decades finally voiced directly. My father looked uncomfortable but answered nonetheless. Your dreams seemed so improbable. Medicine is an elite field and we come from practical people. I suppose we were protecting ourselves from disappointment as much as you. We understood Samantha's ambitions, my mother added. They were familiar, comfortable. Yours took you into a world we couldn't navigate or influence. That was frightening. So you prepared for my failure instead of supporting my success. I summarized, not accusingly but seeking clarity. We were wrong, my father admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. Seeing you in that hospital, everyone treating you with such respect. It was a wake-up call. We've been wrong for a very long time. This acknowledgement, however, belated, felt significant. Not an eraser of past hurts, but perhaps the beginning of a more honest relationship. Over the following months, as Samantha recovered fully, and life returned to normal routines, subtle shifts occurred in our family dynamic. My parents began asking specific questions about my work, actually listening to the answers. They framed a copy of the magazine profile about my surgical innovations and displayed it prominently in their living room. These gestures, while meaningful, couldn't erase decades of dismissal. The foundation of our relationship had been built on shaky ground, and rebuilding required more than polite interest in my career. The real breakthrough came 6 months later when I was scheduled to receive the American College of Surgeons Innovation Award. Without expectation, I sent my family invitations to the ceremony. To my surprise, they not only attended but arrived early, dressed formally, and carrying flowers. Throughout the evening, as colleagues and peers approached to congratulate me, my parents listened attentively to discussions of my work, visibly processing the respect I commanded in my field. During the reception afterward, my father awkwardly approached me. I don't understand half of what your colleagues were saying about vascular reconstruction techniques, he admitted. But I understand that you've changed how surgeons save lives. That matters more than any real estate deal I've ever closed. Coming from him, this was monumental. Later that evening, as the event wound down, my mother took my hand. I'm sorry we couldn't see what was right in front of us all these years. You never needed our validation, but you deserved it nonetheless. I did need it, I corrected gently. Every child needs their parents' belief, but I learned to find that validation elsewhere, and maybe that made me stronger in the end. We were not magically transformed into a perfect family. Decades of established patterns couldn't be undone in months. My parents still occasionally slipped into old habits of comparison, and I sometimes maintained professional distance out of ingrained self-protection. But we were learning a new way to relate to each other, one based on who we actually were rather than who they had expected me to be. Samantha and I developed a more authentic sisterhood, supporting each other's choices without the competitive undertone that had characterized our relationship for so long. The most profound change, however, was internal. Standing in my truth had liberated me from seeking approval I had never received. My success wasn't about proving my parents wrong. It was about being exactly who I was meant to be, regardless of recognition. The morning after receiving the Innovation Award, I performed a particularly challenging vascular repair on a trauma patient. As my hands moved with practiced precision, saving a life that might otherwise have been lost, I felt the pure satisfaction that had driven me from the beginning. This, not titles or family validation, was why I had persisted despite every obstacle. Success isn't measured by proving doubters wrong, but by the lives changed through doing what you love with excellence. In my case, that meant literal lives saved on the operating table. For others, it might mean creating art-building businesses, raising children, or countless other pursuits. The true victory isn't in the moment of revelation, satisfying though that may be. It's in the quiet dignity of pursuing excellence when no one is watching, of becoming extraordinary through consistent dedication to your unique path. Have you ever been underestimated by those who should have believed in you most? How did you respond? Did you try to prove them wrong, or did you simply continue forward on your own terms? Share your story in the comments below, and remember to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give each other is the reminder that we're not alone in these deeply human experiences. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to stand in your truth, whatever that may be.